Hey everyone, Scott DeGrossier here with the Ecommerce Insights. Thanks for joining. I'm with my esteemed guest, as they all are, Tom Breeze.
Hey, yep.
I sought out Tom. I wanted, the best YouTube buyer I know is Tom. He gives great training. He's always down to earth, accessible, but at the same time, it's like advanced material. And I know he invests his own money along with his clients' money. So that counts for something from where I come from. So when I was having YouTube questions myself, and just I know that YouTube is already popular, but even more on the uprise, even for ecom brands, I said, we need to have Tom on. So here he is. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me on, Scott. It's good to be here.
And I have a ton of questions. As I was telling Tom before the episode, we started taping. I said, this was like the fastest podcast prep ever. I had so many questions about about YouTube buying that, I fancy that I kind of know my way around data, but there's always the devil in the details, and the expertise that you need at specific platforms is something I'm really excited to hear about. Now, before we get into all those type of questions, how did you get involved in ad buying to begin with? And then what led you to this passion specifically for YouTube ads?
Good question. So back in, I don't know how many years ago it was now. It was quite a few, probably about 12, 13 years ago or something. I came out of university having studied psychology for 3 years and then did my master's for 2 years. And I come from like a science background and like working with professors and that sort of world. And so for me to come out of the psychology degree and masters, I was like, okay, what do I do now? I'm in a mountain of debt and I need to make some money fast. Oh, I've come from a kind of entrepreneurial family. So my father was still is an accountant, and my brother started his own recruitment company. And so for me, with my mountain of debt, I was like, well, how far could this go wrong? Like, if it goes wrong, it's just another 5-10 grand on top of the debt I already have. So we're no worse off. And so I moved to London, and I was kind of had these skills, and I was like, right, I'm going to try and work with some people. And being in London, I was like, right, what can I do? And the one thing that I've been trained up to be really good at was dealing with anxiety. So I was not like a life coach or anything like that. It's more a case of saying, in the business world, because I was in London, let's see if I can help people overcome some anxiety related issues. And the most obvious one for me was public speaking, presentation skills, kind of meetings, that type of stuff. And I put like an ad in the yellow pages, built like a little website, and it went horribly wrong. I spent a load of money, not even one phone call at the time. And it's the classic marketer's kind of mistake, really. The yellow pages sent the rep round to be like, well, he's got a load of money from him first round. Let's see if we can do the same thing next year. And I remember they came around and said, all you need is a bigger ad. That's all you needed. And I was like, yeah, of course. And so I decided to quit that activity. I was like, well, what do I do now? And it was so lucky because when I registered my business, something must have happened with Google because they found out about my company and they sent me a £30 voucher, which is about like $40 or something in those lines. And they said, here, spend it on Google search. That was the only thing available at the time. And I was using Yahoo, I think it was at the time, wasn't even using Google. I think Google was too popular at the time. So I plugged in and kind of worked out what they'd given me. I realized that I could bid when people were typing in keywords, and I had this £30 voucher. So I was like, okay, fine. And so I kind of worked out what to do. Didn't really think of tracking anything, but I just thought, well, what I'll do is I'll just send some traffic straight from the Google search results to my page. And it said, hey, if you've got public speaking fears, I can help you. Fill in this contact form and I'll call you back. It was the simplest funnel in the world. There was nothing to do with it. That was it, basically. And a phone call and then close them over the phone. And it was like in the good old days of Google. So this was the easiest thing to do in the world. So I ran this text ad, traffic straight to the site, and it worked. And I had 2 phone calls and I closed the client on that day. So £30 turned into just shy of £500. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that was a good return. Maybe I should do the same thing tomorrow, which I did. And it kept on working. So I was like, okay, cool, I can build a business off this. So I kind of fell into the world of advertising without realizing it. And I grew my first business doing that. And I was kind of doing all this one-to-one work with people and it was going very well, but I didn't know much about business at the time. So I kind of capped out. and couldn't do more one-to-ones. I didn't think for a second that anyone else could do what I was doing. Didn't think I could hire anybody to help me. All those like most ridiculous business 101 questions back in the day, I just didn't have a clue about. It's been a sharp learning from there, but I started to do workshops. So I got more and more people into one setting to leverage my time. And from that, someone came up to me and said, "Hey, I'm looking to learn how to speak in public, but I saw that you promoted this workshop with a video." And that's what I'd done. And I worked out how to put a video on my website and promoted this to my email list. And people came to this workshop and they said, "I would love to learn how to do a video for my website." I was like, "Oh, I can help you with that. I can help you speak and present, do a good presentation." And so I kind of went to his offices, filmed it, and they put it on their website, and it worked really well for them. I was like, "Okay, cool. That was different, and I hadn't done that before." I knew nothing about filming either. I just kind of worked out that daylight was good and and microphones were good. And that was basically it. But they loved it, and so I was like, "Okay, fine, that worked." And the more and more I used video, the more and more I realized I was selling better. And I made the jump from just selling to my email list to then put a video on my website. I took a bit more time over this one. I remember kind of looking at my dictaphone because I had to record it into a dictaphone and edit it together afterwards. And I'd done like 123 takes of this 7-minute video. I didn't even think you could edit up the video. I just thought you had to do it in one take. So it took me hours and hours, days and days. And in the end, I got this video stuck on my website, and my conversion rate jumped from about 7% to 22% literally overnight. So I was running these Google ads. And I remember waking up that day and just realizing that, well, hang on a second, I've got so many more people inquiring. Something must have gone wrong with my ad spend. And it was this video and it was working so well. And so from there, I kind of started to get into more and more video. I started to help the people that I was making videos for, help them rank their videos. And I teamed up with somebody, a business partner at the time, and he was ridiculously good at the SEO world. And so he was ranking these videos for some really tough terms because Google really favored video at the time for rankings. That was going exceptionally well until Google changed the rules on us, and all of a sudden it was Panda updates and Penguin. I don't even remember back in the
Yeah,
day when
Panda. I remember
yeah,
that.
all these things just wiped out SEO. And they were like, I can remember like seeing these videos from Google saying you must get backlinks and here's how you do it. And then 6 months later, it's like backlinks are a really bad idea. And I was like, great, this is like thanks Google for giving us that
Always
advice.
change in the industry. It's never stay
Yeah,
static. It's always
everything's changing even today. Like right, everything's changing on multiple platforms right now. And so then I kind of hadn't advertised for a while because I'd just been doing the SEO game. When all these rankings started dropping, one of my clients had a great video. It like perfected how to create video by this point. And I said, well, look, what's if because he fell off the front page of Google and lost all this traffic. And I said, well, what if I try and supplement it with some ads? And I was just embarrassed at the time because I was spending quite a lot of money with us each month on SEO. I said, I'll fund it myself. I'll run some ads because that's how I built my first business. And I was like, well, maybe I can get these YouTube ads to work. I know it's got a good video. I ran it and it luckily worked really well. So we just did some really simple targeting, ran the ad, ran traffic to his website. And I remember like 2 days later, I gave him a call and said, how's it working out? Like, is his traffic any good? And he was like, this is amazing. I was like, okay, cool, that's good. And I was like, how much would you pay for these leads that we're sending you? And he had worked it all out and said, well, they're worth about £40. So how about I give you £10? And I was like, okay. And for me, it was at the time, it was costing about £2 to £3 to
oh,
acquire these leads for him. And so we were both in just a complete win state. Like I think it was like 8xing or something like that. Not that it's like that today, but we just were both like halving the profits basically. And he was ridiculously happy. I was good and we could scale. And it was from that moment on, I never really looked back again. I was like, okay, this is my new world. I love video. I can use all my psychology every single day to work out how to make this messaging even better. I get the math side of it where I can work on the ad accounts. And really it was just like my passion had drawn together to be advertising. And I really didn't want to grow an agency. That was not my intention. I just woke up one day. I was like, I've got lots of clients and I've got some staff running the accounts now. I think I have an agency. So it was a weird realization at that point. But that's what I've been doing ever since, growing and scaling. And now we're teaching other people how to run YouTube ads. We're getting some great results there as well. So it's fun. That's kind of my story of how I got into YouTube ads, but I just love this platform. And even if YouTube changes, it's the whole idea of messaging and getting video working and advertising it and seeing instant returns. It's great fun. I can't think of a better world to live in, better career to have.
oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it's fun when your passion aligns with demand in the market, and you're like, how did you get all that business? You're like, well, I was good at it, but I just love doing it and people need it. So it's not so much you got to compel them to buy your stuff. It's like, I love doing this and you need it. So it's a much easier sales process in those cases I've seen. What
Yeah,
you had a
yeah.
precise date that you had said it was May 21 of 2013 that you would specialize. What was that significance of that date? How do you remember it so well?
Well, that was the date where this result came through. I had to kind of pare it back. I had to work out what that actual date was when you sent that question through to me, and I worked it backwards. I was like, that was the day when I ran the ad and it was a success. And I called the client and said, "Is this working for you?" And he said, "Yes." And I was like, "There's something here." And it was almost like I was like, right, drop everything. Like, team, we're going to focus on just doing this. And a lot of the team weren't interested in advertising. They were just doing the SEO thing. And so a lot of them said, no, we're out. But I was like, okay, that's fine, because it doesn't need many people to run the ad account. And I just remember being like, yeah, this is like my moment of like, I can see what I want straight away. Like, I just want to do this. It definitely has that bug. I think that anyone who becomes an ad buyer doesn't retreat from that lifetime quickly, or like lifestyle quickly. Like, it's quite an addictive thing to get into when you're kind of looking at getting an ad account live, and then the passion of seeing it turn into something and grow and scale. And it's something really exciting about it. Like, I'm still that guy that when an account goes live, I'm like, I don't press refresh every single day quite so much as I used to these days. But I definitely check it on the team. Like, how's that one going? Cool, good. How's that one going? Cool, good. And I can't not do that. It's you just want to see the fruits of your labor, so to speak, but also just see it come to life. I mean, I'm sounding like I'm a real math geek or something like that. I'm really not, but I do love seeing things work, and I feel like you've got enough control to make those things work, and you've got enough levers. You're not kind of held back by anything. It's the responsibility lies with you, which is daunting and stressful sometimes, but also super rewarding.
Super rewarding, because if you had a corporation, you could work really hard and it's just death in a committee.
Oh yeah.
Whereas this one, you can see the fruits of your labor, and you have accountability, but in a positive way. If you do good work, you'll see the results, and there's no denying it. There's a lot of satisfaction in that. So fast forward to 2020, how much ad spend have you spent yourself or managed for your clients? How far has it come since May 21, 2013?
Yeah, so we did just shy of £5 million in ad spend last year. It was a big year for us last year. Like, COVID and all the lockdowns and everything changed the game, especially in March, April last year. I think a lot of ad buyers have experienced a similar thing where, unless you're working in some tourist industry or something, but there's a lot more eyeballs, a lot of ad buyers or a lot of advertising companies pulling spend. And so it just like opened up, like CPMs dropped and many more eyeballs. It was a great time to be advertising. And so, yeah, we had a record year. It was amazing. We actually oversee a lot more ad spend if we were to we do a lot of work with consultancy and all the other clients as well. So we consult, we kind of do a lot of agency work, which is not necessarily our spend sometimes as well. So there's a lot going on. Yeah, we manage quite a bit.
Awesome. I was thinking about with my own company, all this content I have and what am I going to do? And then we deal with e-commerce brands. Some have a ton of videos, some don't. What strategies, what worked best for you, like in general terms?
Yeah, it's a good question. We kind of tend to go back to basics a little bit with all advertising that we do. We kind of look at the 4 A's to make a really successful YouTube ad campaign is going to be normally the ads themselves. That's like probably the biggest lever point, like a really, really solid video ad. We can go deep into that if you wish.
Mhm.
That's like number one. Like, if we can create a really good ad, that really helps. Um, we also have like the audience. So that's targeting your audience. I mean, with YouTube, you do have to think about advertising differently to pretty much all other platforms that I know about. I wouldn't profess to say that I'm an expert in other platforms, but the YouTube platform itself seems to be a bit of a kind of melts people's minds, so to speak, when they first look at it. It can feel like it's a bit daunting because it's a bit like Google, but very different because you're now using a video as opposed to anything else. And it's a bit like Facebook, but you don't have a news feed, you have videos where you're appearing, and it's a very different platform. It's more like a library than it is the social hangout place like Facebook would be. So you have to treat it differently. So the audience is one thing. Acquisition is another one, like the funnels and how you're acquiring the traffic. So what the offers are and the money around that as well. So like the average order value and how much if you're kind of like ROI focused or if you're growth mindset focused, you've got kind of whatever you're playing with on those numbers. And then also like how you run the account, because you got to work with the algorithms somewhat to say, right, what's the best way to get started, the middle kind of phase of like getting from $1,000 a day spend, let's say, to probably what $5,000 a day spend, and then how do you go beyond there to much more spend per day? It's kind of, it goes in phases, and what you do in stage one is not going to be the same as what you do in stage three. So it's kind of it's a growth process through it all. But to say like what the best thing to be doing in 2021 is, it's still going to be the creative. It's like if you create a really good ad and of course you've got a good offer with some good margin, then everything becomes easier. But the audiences are going to go through a bit of a change with everything that's going on with the Apple updates and all that sort of stuff. But in the end, there's search-based audiences, you could always say there's remarketing-based audiences, and there's much more interest-based audiences as well. So knowing that going in, that's the landscape going in. Then it's like the best ads just open up everything, really.
Yeah. So yeah, when we were horsing around in there, it started working out because the targeting in YouTube, it is more Facebook-esque and more accessible because you can just target people and say, figure out when to show them this video. I mean, there's some levers in there, but that really helps. So like just doing a search, just put your competitors in as a search audience. I did that one, and that one's already paying off. And I didn't even have a crappy ad, I think. what what are the components of a good ad in your opinion? I mean, I know that's a whole like massive process, but what do people got to consider when they turn on their camera? Is it working from a script with a specific framework, or just pain points, or what would you recommend there?
Yeah. Okay. So we can go real deep on this one. This one's like, I can speak about this for like days. So we've got kind of like overarching feel before you put pen to paper and start writing a script or anything. The overarching thing is to make sure we got the psychology right, because when you think about any YouTube ad that you've watched recently that you think that was a really cool ad, or that made me go and buy something, you probably don't remember the copy. You don't remember like what they said
That's true.
precisely. Yeah, you remember the
I don't
visuals.
remember my
And
own copy.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And the only time you're going to like, if you were to say, oh, have you seen that ad by this company? You're going to be like, talk about the visuals that you saw. There's things that go unnoticed, things like the script, things like the sound effects, things like the music that goes with it. Sometimes that'll get remembered in the emotion, but it's difficult to articulate that. Whereas the visuals are what gets noticed immediately. Like I was talking to some of the guys at Ad Skills recently, and we did like a workshop on this. And I was like, from the first scene, as soon as you see anything, you so much is being drawn in. So the setting and what you're seeing there is like the first thing that eyes pick up on. And there's a great ad by Masterclass with Gordon Ramsay, where he says at the very beginning, watch carefully. And then he doesn't say anything again for another 23 seconds. And I think it's one of the best ads that's on YouTube right now. And you hear him groaning about how beautiful the food is, and him chopping up food and things like that. But the copy is just non-existent, and it's music and it's visuals and it's sound effects, and it just draws you in, makes you think, I just want to be a chef. So before we get into anything, most people go at video ads with like script first, storyboard is kind of considered maybe, but then it's like, I've got to say these words and then we'll edit it up and see how it looks, and then maybe put some moving images in or something along those lines. And it's kind of killed it on moment one. Like the way to look at this is to say, really, we've got to start with the human psychology and what are we really asking people to do. And it's kind of like something we did about 2 years ago. We kind of took the kind of first principles approach to creating video ads to understand what are we actually trying to do. And if you're doing direct response, then really you're trying to get people to make a decision. And if it's brand awareness, you're looking to get remembered. Those are the two things that are kind of most important. Now, I'm more of a direct response guy, so I'm focused on primarily getting people to take an action. And so when decision making happens, it's like the way your brain makes a decision is, first of all, you've got to wake up the unconscious brain to even be interested in it to begin with. And before that happens, nothing happens. So you might as well get the unconscious brain engaged. And we'll talk about how you can do that in a second if you like. And then the conscious part of your brain kicks in, and then it starts to say, okay, unconscious brain, I know you want something here. Let's logically process this to make sure it makes sense to go and do this thing. So you've got this logic process, this conscious process. And then once both those are happy, then it's a case of like, all right, we might go do this. And that's the point where you've got to put tension on that decision to make someone go do it. When we look at any ad now, we break it into 3 acts. Act 1 is about waking up that unconscious brain. Act 2 is about agreeing with the conscious brain to make it easy for the logic brain to say, all right, yeah, this looks good to me. And then Act 3 is building a huge amount of tension, not on the decision about the offer so much as the decision about who that person wants to be and who they want to become. So it's like an identity decision. Like, if I click this link and go do this thing, it's because I want to be somebody. And if I don't do this, then it says to me I'm not going to be that person. And if we can keep that tension high at the end of the ad, you tend to find that your click-through rates go through the roof, and has a massive impact down the line as well in the rest of the funnel. So yeah, so when we get started, we start with that kind of storyboard to say what we're really doing is waking up the unconscious brain, keeping the conscious brain happy, and then putting a huge amount of tension on the decision to go buy or go do the next step. And that's kind of like start there, and then we can start filling in the gaps from there. So yes, we break it into 3 acts. Think about that storyboard like that. And I'm happy to go into all 3 acts if you like, if we want to go deeper on
No,
that.
I really want to, because I was thinking of a few purchases. Like I bought as I was launching it, I bought the posture buzzer that was going to buzz you if you, and I
Yeah.
used it because I like the idea of like, I'm going to be really healthy as I'm turning 50 this year. And I was thinking, I want to make sure my posture is in line. I don't want to be some creeped over old man hobbling along. But then after a few days, I didn't really use it. I'm not using it. I'm
Yeah.
like, where the hell is that thing? But I was thinking of you when you said that. I was like, yeah, it was like something about I wanted the thing and I didn't know why. And then the tension of who you want to become is like, I want to stay staying healthy is really important. Well, everyone says that, but to me, I try to really take action that way. Like quitting caffeine this year was not trivial. And so I never thought of it that way. So like with our own Wicked Reports advertising, because I'm such a data guy, more like logical. That's not good enough. I mean, it was very clear. Yeah. So
Well,
that,
so yeah, see, like with the posture thing, it's like, even if you don't use it later, there's okay. So the direct response part of me would be like, I couldn't care less if you don't buy it later. That's the business's problem. Like, make them go use it, company. But as the advertiser, I'm like, I need to make you go and buy this thing. With that in mind, I'll be like looking to say like, yeah, there's almost like 2 types of people in this world: people that will take care of their health and their posture now and live a healthier, longer life potentially, or kind of a happier future. And the people that don't do this and will slouch and will inevitably get those back problems, and it'll stop them from doing these things. So you get to choose who you want to be right now. You want to be this person or you want to be this person. I probably wouldn't go as like as conscious as that. I'll probably make it a bit more subtle, but it's still that kind of, you're making that decision about who you want to be, and you're doing that in daily life anyway. You're just pushing that agenda a lot more. So like if I go to a gym and I'm thinking about signing up a membership, I'm kind of saying to myself, I don't really care too much about. I want certain things to be in the gym, and I want certain things to be right about it. That's kind of my values. That's part of the conscious part of your brain. That's Act 2. But really, at the end of the day, I'm making a decision of like, who do I want to be? Do I want to be the healthy guy, or do I not be the healthy guy? Because I'm making that decision right now whilst I'm in this gym, and signing up for a membership. And it's the same with any products. You're very much tying every purchasing decision you make to who you are as a person. So we can kind of draw on that, and we can position it in such a way where people are very aware of the decisions they're making. And it'll be the same for Wicked Reports as well. How people view themselves when they buy Wicked Reports will be a really interesting deep dive to do with your customers, because then you can use that and then use it for your advertising as well.
yeah. Well, mining that first piece, it reminds me of a guy. There's an author, Oren Klaff, Pitch Anything. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Yeah, I love his books. Yeah.
Yeah, because that was triggered mine. I've talked to that guy a couple of times. They're wicked people, and I always loved reading his books because he talk about there's just some mild parallels there with the reptile brain or what have you. How do you know that is that just something like how do you know that part? You're gonna nail that part down, because I imagine you get all kinds of different advertisers, or like an ecom brand. Is that customer interviews? You got to mine that data, or your background must have really helped, I imagine.
I think the
Psychology.
background really formed our model, I think, of like, I went back to the behavioral sciences and behavioral economics to work out like what actually happens in a decision making process, and let's not forget about that when we create create a video ad. So like, I think a lot of people come from video ads either from the copy angle, or come at it from a artistic angle, or come at it from a humor angle, or come at it from lots of different angles that people can come at it. I'm definitely much more a case of like, hey, I don't really care what angle we take as long as people make a decision to go buy this thing. That's my core. However you want to dress it up with humor or anything, fine, but let's not lose that element of like, we have to go through this process because that's how the brain works. Like, there's no point ignoring that. And you can still make sales, don't get me wrong, without it. It's just that you're going to optimize the process as best as possible. So I suppose there's a lot of the marketer in me and the direct response advertiser, all the stats that I'm getting on a daily basis coming through and analyzing all the videos that work best, that all helps because you start to see the trend of the data and saying, okay, cool, let's pull all the best ads we've run over the last 5 years and see if there's a trend of what's going on here. That helps.
Yeah.
But it's I suppose like my skill would be a case of like taking all that information and turning it into a model that we can use, but understanding why that model works in the first place is kind of key to that. And yeah, so that first act is we start off with like the offer itself, and we say, right, what's the benefit of the offer? And that's obviously 101 of marketing. And then we say, right, well, who does that, if that person does decide to take you up on that offer and buy that product, who is that person imagine they'll become? So that's that identity piece that is just so strong that a lot of people forget about as well. So who you're deciding to be, if we can make that a conscious decision to people, they're like, oh, okay, I get to decide who I want to be in my future here. That's key. And when they make that decision, one of the biggest things they'll be tying that to will be their desires. So our deep rooted desires. And we're not always aware of what our deep rooted desires are. And even when it's shown to us painfully in front of us, we still don't see it. so okay, let's say take an example of like a 4x4 car, like a SUV type vehicle, or like an off-roading vehicle, and like a new fancy one that might come out from like Range Rover or something along those lines. You probably got many more fancy ones in the in the
Range
US.
Rover's right up there.
Okay, perfect. Okay, when you watch an advert on TV about Range Rover, you're gonna not see them talk about the mileage, or definitely not the health benefits, or like the benefits to the environment or anything like that. What they're going to tie into it is that say, okay, you're going to see the car go up the mountainside or go off-roading, and then you'll probably see that the driver is someone who you kind of would love to be in a idealistic world if you're in the market for a Range Rover. So you see them kind of drive to the top of a mountain and then get out and chart a course and go snowboarding or something, or they drive off the beaten track, find a secluded beach and get out and go surfing. There's going to be some sort of, we've all seen those ads, right? Like that's kind of, and all they're doing is they're promoting adventure to say, really, if you buy this car, you get adventure. And that's what our brains all pair together. Like, I get that car, I live an adventurous life. And your unconscious is like, yeah, love it, take it in all day. Like, I love that car. And you want it all of a sudden. Consciously, not really too sure why you want it, but you just have fallen in love with it. Psychologists all know, and marketers all really know deep down, but the general public don't know that. With like, most people are just like, yeah, I don't know why I like it, I just do. And it's like, because you think it's going to give you adventure, and adventure is a deep core, like rooted emotion that you can't escape sometimes. It's just born, we all have it. But every product's done like that. A lot of like adverts you'll see on TV are well crafted because they're tying into that deep desire that we all have. If I was to go and buy a drill bit from a store, for example, there's the classic marketer's tale, which is you're not buying the drill bit, you're buying the hole in the wall. You're not even buying the hole in the wall, you're buying the shelf and like level of organization in the house or something. And I'll go much further than that. I'd say, no, you're really, if you get that shelf up, two things happen. One, you can show off to your friends and your family to say, hey, look, I can get organized, my house looks beautiful. But you may be doing it for the sake of showing off to your husband or wife or whatever relationship you might have. You're showing off to them to say, I can do DIY around the house. I can be that person who you don't believe I can be. I'll prove it to you, type thing. So if I'm going to the store, I'm buying a drill purely for the fact that, like, I've got to show my wife that I can do the DIY stuff around the house. That's in my head, that's an important role for me to to hold up. And if I don't have that, what do I have? You're making decisions based on a deep desire to be like that person, or pride, or whatever it might be. And it kind of goes for every purchasing decision. It's like a deep rooted desire behind it. And once you know what that is, you can play this out a little bit to say, well, you can get a certain level of status with that purchasing decision. You can become part of an in-group. They all might have shares, similar values, and they stand for certain things and stand against certain things. and might behave in a certain way. But once you start forming this visual scene in your head almost to say, like, if you buy our product, you will get this desire, whatever that might be. And that desire can manifest itself in a visual scene. And then you're like, that could just be the scene of Act One. Because then as soon as someone sees that setting, they're going to be like, oh, I want that. And they won't know why. But they're like, I want whatever it is that's in front of me. We did this recently with I think one of our best ads we've created in a while, where it's someone teaching people how to play piano. And Carmen Moran is her name. She's just unbelievable. She's an amazing pianist. That helps, of course. And we're thinking, right, what is the deep-rooted emotion that you want your customers to have? Or what do they really want to have? And she was like, they want to sit down at the piano and just lose themselves on the piano. And the keys just come to life and they're in complete flow. Time just seems to disappear. It's that kind of complete creative freedom where they can just be who they want to be on the piano and they don't have to think, it's just happening. And they just go away with their flow state. And weirdly, a new film from Disney Plus has just come out, which kind of shows that beautifully. And so we were talking about this. And I was like, well, where do you get that? Like, if you were to fall asleep and have a dream, what would that place look like? And she was like, kind of for some reason see a piano on a beach. I was like, perfect. Okay, can we take one of your? And she was like, she works with Steinway. I was like, can we take a Steinway to the beach? She's like, I'll see what I can do. She couldn't because it would like the Saltaire would have destroyed the destroyed the piano. I was like, okay, fine. And she's like, well, the next best thing is I can take it to the mountains. And there's a beautiful lake that I know on a golf course. And in the background, there's this like huge mountain with snow peaks and it's got evergreen trees there. I was like, okay, cool. Do you think you can get it there? And she's like, I think I can. So she took it there. She got like removal men to help her to get it to this location. She then filmed it. So our Act One scene now is her walking to this piano at the bottom of this mountain with this beautiful lake. And then she starts playing. And if you're into piano or you ever want to learn piano, you are not leaving that video anytime soon. You're
Oh,
just
man.
glued to it. And you end up saying to yourself, I want to be her doing that thing and feeling that emotion of complete creative freedom. And that's to say, like, that's one of our better performing ads and it's done in a beautiful way. It could be done on a budget as well, but it's that moment in the ad where instantly the customer's mind, unconscious mind, is like, I'm in for this. I don't know what's going on here, but I want what's going on. So that's Act One done, so to speak.
Yeah. So with an ecom brand, it's almost, yeah, they got to think back through why someone buys it to begin with.
Yeah, exactly. So
Buying.
yeah, give me an example. We'll see if we can unpick it. And I
Like,
think that might
let's
be a good idea.
see. Okay, well, we have one of our case studies always with a guy that sells lobsters online. And
Sells
so
lobsters in like the food lobsters.
the food
Or
lobsters. Yeah.
okay, fine, yeah.
So his thing is that he does always say they're trying to buy this experience of having this meal gathering with friends, and that's kind of like why they're buying. So he does
Yeah.
have a video that is pretty good. Now I'm thinking about it. He should be using it more, where he just shows everyone celebrating around eating, unpacking, and doing his lobsters. Sounds
Got it.
similar. It's what made me think of it when you were doing it. I was like, ooh, it reminds me of that lobster video.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's exactly where I'll go with it. I'll be like, you're sharing food with friends, and it's a really powerful moment because that's a big status thing. Because if you end up cooking the lobsters and however you cook them, I don't know the best way to cook a lobster. It's that what we want to be looking at is the person that's serving them up. We want to see certain scenes. We want to see them cooking it and their friends coming over as they arrive and being like, "What are you cooking? It smells amazing." That type of kind of scene. And we want them to be in a beautiful kitchen, like in an entertainment space as well. So it's like everyone's having fun, and the lobsters come out and people are looking over, or done in a cool way, not in a really cheesy way. And then there's definitely gonna be a moment where the lobsters are put down in front of everybody, and we want to see them faces. We want to see them eating it, smiling, talking, and you basically become the super host. That's what the status you're buying there is, that you're becoming that person. And that's kind of like definitely one of the biggest acts you want to have, is like showing that you become this person. You own that space as well, and that's really important to make sure that kind of you're pulling on that from the very beginning. I think that's probably the reason why, and obviously I would love to chat to the person to understand it, but I can imagine that's the main reason why people are buying the lobsters. One, for the food itself, but maybe more importantly is like, I'm the guy that cooks lobsters and has friends around and hosts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that is. I don't know if he emphasized that enough. I don't know. I just remember the
That's what
video.
people are buying. Yeah, they're buying a new identity or a level of status within a group as well. And really, one of a great selling point would be what wine lovers do. Like, so they'll buy a bottle of wine, but they'll, if they know the story behind the wine, they'll probably pay twice as much for that wine bottle. And then when they pour it, they'll tell their guests about the wine as well. So it could be a really good thing to pair the lobster with the wine and maybe have like an additional upsell, for example, about like what wine goes best with the lobster and why, so that when the person's serving at the lobster, they can say, oh, and you should really have this wine, by the way, and here's why. Because it makes you look like even more of a super host. You know, it's like, oh, I now bow to your cooking and also to your wine um,
Well,
levels.
we have a couple wineries using Wicked Reports, and one guy he came to my house where he was headed out to a wine festival. He's like, "Hey, I'm kind of out to Nantucket. It's an island off New England area." And I was like, "Well, we'll see. We'll have a wine tasting. You know, maybe you can sell some wine. Who knows?" I knew his wine was quite good, so I was happy to have him over anyway. And he tells
Yeah.
this story, and it was like phenomenal. And he ended up making like a couple grand that recurs every 3 months with his shipment. I look back, I was like, this wine tasting is not worth like that stop over my house when we stayed up till 2 a.m. drinking made you $6,000. And it was the
Recurring.
power of his story. Because if I just said, hey, some good wine, I like it, I drink good wine, I think, I don't know, it would be one thing. But he had such a, he's just a master storyteller. And by the end, you're like, I want to support this guy anyway. And then you taste the wine, and it actually is incredible. So that helps too.
Well, it probably tasted better as well because of
Oh
the fact
yeah.
that you had the story behind it in your palate already, you know. But that's the beauty of a story. Like one of the key things about telling a story, even if it's like a small 30-second, 20-second, 10-second story, is that the missing piece for a lot of people is like, yes, the story can be really persuasive, but the reason why it can be so persuasive is because anytime someone tells you a story, deep within that is the fact that the person who's telling the story cares. Because if to tell you a story, they must care about you. You know, there's no, you don't just tell stories to random people. You can only tell stories to people that you're kind of somewhat intimate with. And so that's another unconscious thing. As soon as we've been telling a story, we trust the person that's telling it. And yes, you get there's so many benefits behind telling stories. It's just innate within us to listen, to see where the story's going. But with that, it's like this almost like a Trojan horse. It's like that the person cares about us. Yeah, it's such a powerful medium for sure.
Yeah, we could talk about this forever. I want to shift gears so we finish somewhat on time here. A couple specific tactics within YouTube. So the
Mhm.
what format style? I personally like there's like a true view for action where you can capture the lead right in there, particularly if you're doing a brand that's going to have more consideration rather than maybe compel them to buy immediately. We always like it if people can capture them, to remarket to them all the different ways. And then also it's a great measure of success. Top of the funnel is, hey, I got the lead at least, even if I
Mm.
didn't close the sale right away. Do you guys do a lot with that? And what any particular tips along those format?
Yeah, so do you mean like the lead ads, like the YouTube lead ads? Is that
Yeah,
what you're kind of
YouTube
thinking?
lead ads there. Yeah.
Yeah, so we don't use a huge ton of it. We kind of most of the time we'll kind of still use the true for action, but get people to click through to the site, and then could do lead gen on the site if you like. We just find it better results typically that way. Like there is the kind of lead ad approach, and that does work. It's just the more that history of it's been very much like lower quality leads tend to come through that
Mm-hmm.
way. It might be changed more recently. We haven't tested it so aggressively recently, but yeah, we do prefer kind of getting the click to the site and then getting the opt in there. We tend to
Yeah,
find
that's
that
what I meant.
performs
The
better. Oh,
CTA.
okay.
I
Yeah,
didn't say
exactly.
it
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
that's fine. No, no, that's cool. You do have like it wasn't beta. I think they've kind of I don't know what it's they're doing with it now. I think it might actually be a thing available for people. But the ad and then underneath you have like especially on mobile devices you can just like do name and email and a bit like a Facebook lead ad, so to
Yep.
speak. But the yeah, I'll by far our preferred ad type is going to be the skippable TrueView ad, which is like yeah in the bottom left hand corner you have the white box, the blue button. Bottom right hand corner you have the skip ad button. You have to wait for 5 seconds, and then that's on desktop, and then similar on mobile, but the call to action is underneath. And yeah, straight click back to the website. That's kind of our easiest, our best performing ad. So yeah, we always stick with that format. We do some discovery ads and things like that, but we tend to dial in pretty much most of our activity on those true for action in stream ads.
Okay. And then if you're an ecom brand in particular, like you're a piano lady there, what are like the default audiences you find that you want to? I mean, it always takes testing, right? But what are the ones that you're like, you've got to do these audiences, and if it's if these audiences should work, so it's the ad. If it's not the audience, it'd be the ad. Like, what are the ones you start with?
Yeah, so I think like our rule of thumb for a long time has been very much like build from the ground up. We're not so interested in remarketing. It's a kind of different game compared to Facebook anyway, remarketing, but we love closing cold traffic and finding new customers. That's kind of much more fun, I find. So you can kind of you can kind of build from the ground up. So with your search behavior, like search activity, if you've got like a natural search audience on YouTube, then it's probably best to start there. And if you want like a really good return on ad spend, something like placement targeting down to the individual videos can work really well. It just won't scale very well, but do it anyway. The reason being is you can start to see what videos you're advertising in front of, and that gives you great insight into what your customers actually want and what they actually do. It can be really, really useful.
Mm.
So we use like a tool called Adzula. You might plug in a keyword and it'll give you all the videos that rank for that particular key phrase or keyword. And then you can like take all those videos and then put them into your placement campaigns, and then it'll advertise to all of those videos and you can see which ones work well. Some of them are going to like perform ridiculously well for you. Some of them just don't really get any activity at all, but it doesn't really bother you. I love looking at the titles of the video that perform well and then be like, that's interesting. And it kind of gives me insight as to where I should go next with my targeting. Because then you can move up to things like keyword targeting. We still love keyword targeting. It works really well. And then you can move into custom intent targeting or custom audiences based on Google searches. That's where you kind of like give Google some seed keywords. They'll find an audience for you of people that type those keywords in recently. And then you can advertise to that audience when they come to YouTube, which is really cool.
Yeah,
They're
I
really
love
good because
that.
they can scale. Especially if you've got a lot of competitors. So like Wicked Reports, there's probably a lot of other platforms that do a similar thing or complementary services as well, where if they're looking for that, they'll be interested in Wicked Reports as well. It's just a no-brainer to go do those activities.
Mhm.
You can also build custom audiences based off of people's or domains that people might visit as well. And that's really cool. So you can say, if they've been to this website, then I want to go into my custom audience and I'll advertise to them as well. Not so
Ooh,
many
I
people
didn't know
doing
that.
that, but you didn't know that.
No,
Oh, that's cool. Okay,
that's
yeah. So
beautiful because that's like the search, but even better. It's that much higher quality signal. They've even
yeah,
done.
exactly. If you go to any of these, you can put like a whole batch of domains in there. They have to be at the domain level. So if it was like wikipedia.com/analytics or something, it wouldn't be, that might be a good page for you, but it'll be a terrible website to to add to your pool. I'm sure you get the idea. So that's gonna be really cool. Also, you can do it based off apps that people have on their phones as well, which is really clever. So should people be downloading certain apps onto their phone, you can say, if they download that app, that's my ideal customer. Let's advertise to them as well. So that's pretty clever. And then like the ones I really love, but are not always easy to get working, are things like topics, in markets, and affinities. You'll find your conversion rates are not going to be great from day one, but once you've got a lot more activity through your pixel, our pixels, then you'll find that the algorithms start to understand your audience a little better. And so when you start like turning on these like in-market audiences, like for e-commerce, in-market, it's just a no-brainer. And there's going to be some audiences there available to you that you can go target, and it's just really, really helpful. And also affinities can be really quite broad sometimes, but if you've got the algorithms on your side and a good ad and a good offer, they'll just scale all day long. And that's a really good place to get to. It's almost like where you get started and where you end up on YouTube advertising looks wildly different, hence why there's like these phases you go through. But in the end, you kind of want the algorithm helping you as you go to these big, big, broad audiences and getting great results. So your conversion rates might be a little lower potentially, not always, but sometimes a little lower for the bigger audiences, but the CPMs are cheaper. So it's a cheaper place to advertise, slightly lower cost, slightly lower conversion rates, but you're like, this is like a huge audience and it will just keep on working for you. So there's a lot of activity that's happening there. One thing we found more recently that's been really, well, not more recently, it's just more that it's become a strategy that we've been rolling out quite a lot more recently, is when you do go to those big markets, those big in markets and affinity audiences, and you're advertising there, it's sometimes really good to see where your ads showed up. So you can look inside your campaigns and see, where did we actually show up? Like, where did our ads, what channels, what videos did our ads run in front of? And if you start to see a bit of a trend there, you can then take that audience and add them as channel placements. So let's say, for example, you ran your video ads to a big affinity audience, and then you kind of did a bit of a digging around in where your ads showed up inside that campaign, you might notice that like CNBC or Fox News is like a massive channel you just keep on getting conversions from. Can be quite a good idea to then say, well, let's test out that particular channel just by itself with our ads and see how that works. Sometimes it doesn't work, but
Mhm.
sometimes it does. And it's great because then the cost per acquisition could be far lower and it still scales really well as well. So lots of different ways in which you can target your customers. But it's like I've been doing this for 8 years and I'm still finding new stuff and new ways of running ads and all that. So it's like it's not to say that it can't be done. It's just not gonna crack it on day one. It's just but it give it a couple of weeks and you get some great results, and then you kind of keep on scaling and growing and seeing what works.
That's awesome. I did a webinar at Google in New York back when a conference back when you used to be able to go to conferences.
The good
And
old days.
one thing,
Yeah.
yeah, one thing they were reason why one of the reasons I could present there was that yeah, the Google related to what you said was the lifetime value of Google really grows over time. Like right out of the gate, Facebook can be fast to fish out of a very small pond and do okay, but those Google campaigns just compound over time, the good ones. It just their
Mhm.
algorithm takes a little longer to learn, but then can drive a lot longer value consistently, whereas Facebook can be quick and then peter out. And we found that just when I was looking over, we tracked, I don't know, a couple billion in ad spend. I felt look for the trends, and it was, man, that Google really can compound over time. 90,
Yeah.
180 days out, they're still learning and scaling at more modest levels of ad spend. It was really eye opening.
We found that some of our best clients are ones that are not expecting anything from YouTube, so we can kind of take it quite slow, and we just kind of keep on increasing the budgets and just keep on finding new areas and keep on scaling. And they're like, hey, this, especially if it's a company that is not spoiled by Facebook, if that makes sense. Like some people have like really scaled up very quickly on Facebook and think this is what advertising is like. It's like it's what this current situation is like. It's great because I've been through the Google ads like beautiful days in the early days where it was like you could make so many mistakes and still make money. And then that gets really, really tough over time. And now it's getting to the point where it's found its level ground. But I think a lot of people on Facebook are kind of getting away with the platform itself, and it's great, but that won't last forever. No platform ever does. YouTube's going to get so much harder in the future as well, but there'll be other platforms that open up and things. But yeah, I always look at it and saying like, as we take on these clients that don't expect too much, and they're not saying, "Hey, how do we get this to $20,000 a day next month?" You're like, "Okay, that doesn't happen in a month. That takes a little longer sometimes." Whereas when clients are like, "Hey, we spent $500 last week. That was amazing," and you're like, "Okay, cool. This is great. There's no stress here." They build the best campaigns because you just have this kind of longevity over it, and you've got such a dialed in campaign. You've never had to push anything too hard, so it just keeps on growing nicely. And yeah, that can be the best campaigns to grow because it, as you say, it compounds over time and you just build such solid, like solid campaigns. It's amazing.
That's great. So one last question here. So 2021, what's your advice for advertisers for this year and moving forward?
Yeah, I think there's two things. One is data, and the other is creative. So I think like the data storm is is coming, and I think that
Mhm.
you are very aware of that as well, Scott. I think that you probably know far more about it than I do. But yeah, I think that like the Apple starting off with Facebook is just the start. I think that this is going to become there's going to be more and more question marks as time goes on, and I don't know how that's going to play out. But the more we can use tools like Wicked Reports, the better. Like just get all that solid data into from the CRMs and back into the ad accounts as best as possible. Uh, and then also creative is kind of, I think, where it's going. And people are talking about all the fact that creative can be AI'd, so to speak, and I just don't see that happening anytime soon. Like coming up with a new creative idea is what humans are good at. I don't think that can be algorithmed out just yet, and I'm not sure if it ever will. But not to say that it can't help, but it's not going to be like it's sometimes that difference in the creative spark that's needed to make a real campaign work. And so yeah, so I'm continue to double down on the things we're doing well in. But yeah, creative is kind of one of those areas that doesn't need to be super complicated just to get really, really good ads, and doesn't need to be high spend. It's just sitting down and thinking for a little bit. It's fun work as well, but when you get an idea and you run with it and you let it play out, it doesn't have to be high spend. It can be like low spend, like sub $500, and you can create a masterpiece. And that's kind of what's exciting about the platform, is that, yeah, a creative piece is the biggest lever you can pull inside of an account. So that's where all of our focus and attention goes.
That's great. So where can people learn more about you, and what services would you recommend they first engage in? I know you have a couple of offerings.
Yeah, so we have two main offerings. We've got one, which is if you want to learn how to become a YouTube ad buyer, we kind of work with you for a whole year, and quite a creative thing. We released it late last year, and we didn't want to be another training course, so to speak. Like, we're not so interested in that. We're more a case of like, we want to train people up to like hold their hand and teach them. And so we've got adbuyersclub.com, which is where we do all of that. And then with our agency, that's viewability.co.uk. So if people want to have us run their ads for them. But yeah, we're very, very performance based. We like to make sure that we kind of partner with our clients, whether it be viewability or whether it be Ad Buyers Club. We kind of partner with them to help them get amazing results and grow and scale with them.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time. I learned a ton. It was really fun.
Cheers, Scott. Thanks so much for having me.
Bye.